Alright, so good day, class. I think you already discussed most of the topic which is covered in Planning 1. So let's talk about green building basics already. So when you say green building basics, it talks about sustainability. So sustainability can be defined as the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So then what are some of the things that come to mind when you think about a green building? So a green building is the practice of creating structures and using processes that are environmentally responsible and resource efficient throughout a building's life cycle. So the life cycle respectfully analyzes and integrates site selection through design, construction, operation, maintenance, renovation, and reconstruction. The practice expands and also complements the classical building design concerns of economy, utility, durability, and comfort. So when you talk about green buildings, when you design green buildings, it, it, it does not mean that you just um, think about a single process. So you have to think about the whole life process of the building from start to finish and to the post construction. So that's how you're going to think about the impact of the things that you're going to integrate in the design and the implementation. So a note here is that the term green building is often used as a synonym for sustainable construction and high performance building. So when you say high performance, it means that we're going to minimize resource consumption. So in short, high performance buildings are designed and built to minimize resource consumption, reduce life cycle cost, maximize health and productivity for the building's occupants, and improve environmental performance. So everywhere you turn these days, you can't help but hear about green building, global warming, and rising energy prices. So if you think about our city right now, it's quite hot. 10-20 years ago, temperature is around 27 degrees. But right now, due to the scorching heat, it even reaches up to 40. So while we used to consider these issues someone else's problem or something a future generation would have to worry about, now we are realizing the issues are impacting our lives and are our problem today. I think this is especially true because you're experiencing it right now. So energy prices in the US have gone from 7.73 cents per kilowatt hour in 1994 to a high of 10.35 cents in 2014. So a cost of increase of 2.6 cents may not seem like a large price increase until you convert into commercial real estate terms. So consider a retail chain of stores paying to light, cool, and monitor its stores across the country. So if the chain has 3 million square feet of space, this company is now paying 25% more for energy every hour, every day, and these costs add up. So this cost increase affects not only stores but also the customers who shop there and the vendors who supply the chain with products because the store remains profitable to stay open. So if the company would use less power and derive a significant savings from the conscious energy consumption reduction, the company would have a much greater competitive advantage. Okay. So I think this is a good analogy, class. If you look at it in the Philippine context, I think the the price difference here is much greater, especially considering that majority of Filipinos have low income. So energy costs are really significant here in the Philippines. And if you think about it in a large scale, the sum is a huge amount. So, and what are the impacts of buildings and construction? So commercial construction requires the greatest quantity of resources in the building industry. So while this study looks at green building across several product types within the construction, the impacts from the commercial construction in the United States include, so this is just in this data is just from the United States. It's 72% of electrical consumption, 39% of energy use, 38% of all carbon dioxide emissions, 40% of raw materials use, 30% of waste output, which is 136 million tons annually, and 14% of potable water consumption. So this is a huge amount. That's why buildings and construction has a huge impact, especially when you're constructing and doing it in a large scale. So green building design and construction practices that meet specified standards will help resolve much of the negative impact that buildings have on their occupants and on the environment, but reducing impacts is not the end goal. Remember that green buildings are constantly changing and progressing. So today's new idea may become tomorrow's standard practice. So there are projects that have already achieved net zero energy use or have found a way to achieve water balance and only use the water naturally occurring on the project site for water needs. There are already projects that have achieved carbon neutrality through reduced energy use and on-site energy generation. So green is already moving to the next level by striving for regenerative design. So these would be projects that do not end but rather renew resources for future use. So what does this mean, class? So what does this mean, class? So it means that regenerative design is that when you think about it, for example, you have a building, then you're going to add green features such as water recycling, so it just continually recycles the water. Then the resources it's not wasted, and you could also integrate food production facilities on your integrated on your landscape, and it would make the building much more sustainable. At the same time, because if you have a lot of vegetation in your buildings, it cools the building also, thus reducing the need to cool the building, the infrastructure mechanically. And the built environment. So the built environment is the human-made surroundings that provide the setting for human activity. So ranging in scale from personal shelter and buildings to neighborhoods and cities, this goes beyond just building, but also includes transportation systems, roads, bridges, etc. So the building environment accounts for two-thirds of all greenhouse gas emissions because the already existing built environment contributes so much of the greenhouse gases. It is important that those resources are made more efficient. Perhaps by operating them more efficiently, buildings, and by using them more effectively, infrastructure. So the built environment contributes to 67% of all greenhouse gas emissions. If you relate this to planning, guys, and to urban development, you could see that the built environment really contributes a lot to the greenhouse gas emissions. That's why when you think about planning, you should talk you should think about doing green buildings and adding sustainability principles in your designs. So green buildings are specifically designed structures that reduce the overall negative impact of the built environment on human health and the natural environment by one, efficiently using energy, water, land, and materials; two, protecting occupant health and improving employees' productivity; reducing waste and pollution from each green building; continuously looking for ways to improve performance. High-performance green buildings address sustainable development through the building's entire life cycle. from the beginning with the building site selection and design all the way through the end of the building's life. So sustainable buildings are significantly better than standard buildings. Use less energy, save money over time, provide better occupant health and comfort, and are better to the environment. So to achieve the many benefits of green buildings, the whole building design was developed. So what is a whole building design class? So in the traditional planning and design process, building systems were viewed as a separate elements. You have the site, the structure, systems in use, and design decisions were each based on budget and or schedule considerations. So changes to a design in order to meet a certain budget or follow an accelerated schedule did not take into account the final performance of the completed building. So if you look at it, you could see the interdependent building considerations of the whole building design. So you have to look at the building envelope, then consider also the ventilation, which is the if you look at it, the fenestrations you're going to use in the building, are you going to cool the spaces within, the site in the water, the heating and cooling, what we usually do in architecture, which is orientation and massing. Because massing plays a huge role also, class, especially if the location of your development is within an area that you could maximize the airflow, and you have here lighting and power, and the materials. So these are the different interdependencies and considerations of a whole building design. So the house as a system model is a favorite approach in the green construction industry. So whole building design views all of a building systems together as they operate interdependently. Sustainable design begins when projects are first imagined and requires thinking green at every stage in the life cycle. So when you also design your cities, guys, in your urban design development, you have to think sustainably all throughout the stages. So owners, designers, engineers, and builders play vital roles in reducing the environmental impact of the built environment. So starting with the decision to build new or renovate, an issue such as the way the building is oriented would have the project team asking these questions. So how is sunlight going to enter the building? How will the orientation affect the heating and cooling loads? Then what impact will that have on the window glazing? So whole building design is an integrative design and uses an integrative project team. So it is this approach that we will facilitate sustainable design for the future. So when you say integrative project team, you're not only talking about the architect, you're talking about the architect and the other professionals, which are also important in the planning, design, and construction phases. So these are the conventional building process. So the conventional building process follow these steps that are very similar. So I think you're also familiar with this. First, we have the design. Then we have the construction plans, the bidding process, the construction, the commissioning and turnover, and finally the occupancy. So in the conventional building process, specialists usually work in isolation, focusing only on their separate area of project expertise and interacting and working together only when absolutely needed. So these are examples of team members working in isolation. So an example would be the insulation used in the project. Enough insulation would be installed to meet the code and at the lowest cost. The HVAC system would be designed to cool the building based on area without regard to what insulation was being used or which insulation would be most effective for the HVAC system. The contractors work in isolation, just concentrating on their own concerns. not the overall building or the needs of its occupants or relation to the environment. So, initial costs and operating costs can actually increase because of this approach. So, this is the conventional approach. And now let's look at the integrative process. So, an integrative process is an approach that integrates people, systems, business structures, and practices into a process that collaboratively harnesses the talents and insights of all participants to optimize project results, value to the owner, reduce waste, and maximize efficiency through all the phases of design, fabrication, construction, and ongoing operations. The integrative process requires collaboration among key stakeholders and design professionals from conception to completion. A stakeholder may be the building owner, a major tenant, or an end user customer. So, like a college student who uses a building for classes. Decision making processes and complementary design principles should be established early in the planning, satisfying the goals of multiple stakeholders while still achieving the overall objectives of the project. So, in this process, guys, you don't only achieve or plan to achieve the goals that you've set, but you also have to think of satisfying everyone, even the stakeholders of the project. So stakeholder meetings may be hard to schedule or may include stakeholders opposed to new technologies or green strategies. But even if a project encounters stakeholders who resist the new way of planning a project, they can still be beneficial. Project teams can work to alleviate their concerns, which will lead to a happier stakeholder group at the project's delivery. So during the integrative process, team members work together, communicate throughout the process of the building's design and construction. Professions that traditionally may not communicate do so, and the process evaluates how design decisions and components will be affected by other site decisions and components. So, the integrative process results in greater efficiencies, with some estimates showing that single projects employing integrative project teams can achieve savings of 2 to 10% in the cost of the construction. So this is the integrative team members, so they work as one. Everybody is important. So the project phases of an integrative process are different from the conventional process. So you have the pre-design, the design, the construction plans, the bidding process, the construction, commission to the building, the occupancy and commissioning, and of the building end of life reuse or demolition recycle. So it has quite a different process, guys, from the conventional methods. So let's look at this, the pre-design. So first you need to make a plan. So you don't go on a vacation without a plan. So when we are leaving, what are we packing? How are we getting there? What are we going to see? Where will we eat? How much money should we bring? And what's our budget, etc. So you start with a project vision and then define green building goals while getting input from stakeholders. Then next you create a team and identify a budget. Brainstorm about opportunities to gain incentives and cooperation with government organizations. Create a timeline and methodology, and decide on which measurement tools you will use to identify progress. So calculate the return on investment and don't get to identify risk. So probably the most critical phase of the integrative process is the pre-design phase. It is in this phase where the groundwork is laid for the entire project. So this means, guys, that this is the foundation of the entire project. So extra time and effort is part of the pre-design phase. but this helps keep the project on track and improve cost and control. So the integrative process increases the level of effort during early design phases, resulting in reduced documentation time and improved cost control and budget management. So all of which increase the likelihood that the project goals, including the schedule, life cycle cost, quality, and sustainability will be achieved. So the pre-design phase will include several new steps. So the first is the life cycle approach. So at the very beginning of the pre-design phase, it is important that all those involved are viewing the project through the lens of the life cycle approach. So this life cycle approach does not focus on the delivery of the completed project, but goes much further to the life cycle of the building and eventual reuse of the project or its demolition and hopefully recycling. So when you look at the life cycle approach, guys, you look at the project or the building in its entire life cycle. You consider its beginning up to its end and how you're going to reuse it so that it would be sustainable. So that you would have to allocate resources again to rebuild a new building. Okay. So I guess these are just of some of the principles in green building design that we could apply in planning also. So with this, I'm going to end our lecture for planning this with this life cycle approach, guys. So I'm going to post our activity on our Padlet page. It would be about integrating some of green building strategies in planning and designing cities, because the principles in green buildings it's not and integrated project teams is not only applicable in buildings but also in large scale community developments. Okay. So this is our lecture for green building basics. So if you have any further question or clarifications, guys, you can send a message anytime and I'll answer them. Okay. So take care and see you next meeting.